Jim Ratasha Vicarja. This is the Irish Unity podcast. You're very welcome back. It's 16th of May 2020. Now we're going to dedicate today's episode to replicating a written tribute to the late Martin McElkerney, whose first anniversary occurs today. The piece was originally written for the Pensive Quill back last Christmas. So I hope you'll all stay tuned for the duration. Carmela Maigov. Social capital theory suggests that the settings into which we are born and raised by and large determine our opportunities and as such the courses of our life. Marty McElkerney was born into Bedick Street in 1962, one of Belfast's now long since demolished red brick streets of sprawling proportions, just off the Crumlin Road in what is now roughly the Lower Shankill area, in settings that could not by any social standards be considered as normal. Born into a quasi-fascist state, the leaders of which resented his very existence by virtue of his religion, and who regularly concocted novel social schemes designed to encourage Catholics to leave, Marty Mac's Donegal-born mother and Tyrone father would have faced subtle discrimination of varying degrees on a daily basis and were most likely simply tolerated in their district. Soon into Marty's childhood, that toleration would evaporate before his eyes. In August 1969, along with so many others, the McElkerney family were forced to flee their home as it was torched by Paisley's mobs, determined to stem the growing confidence of the nationalist population in the wake of the ongoing civil rights initiatives of that year. His younger brother James still remembers staring down from his bedroom at the hats of disinterested RUC men who refused to prevent Orange gangs from engaging in the pogrom that was being played out across Belfast and beyond. James kindly related to me over Christmas the situation that they found themselves in following the pogroms, describing firstly the makeshift camp that his family and 49 other families were forced to live in as a shanty town of old caravans. By all accounts, the conditions at the Beachmount evacuation camp were appalling, and its occupants' anger was becoming fast palpable. Conditions in the nearby camp at Cullingtree Road were no better, as scores of families squeezed into no more than 9 makeshift huts there. From the Beachmount camp, Marty's parents were allocated a house in the poorly constructed Spring Hill area of West Belfast, an area designated for attention by Mother Teresa and her missionaries of charity due to its impoverished status. It would soon also become a war zone. Marty McElkerney was 9 years old, within earshot of his home, when an occupying British army slaughtered 11 unarmed civilians, including Father Hugh Mullen, in a 2-day operation of deliberate terror, designed to inflict an atmosphere of total fear, complementing the ongoing internment operation that was affecting every family in the district. Less than a year later, outside his own front door, 5 more neighbours, including Father Noel Fitzpatrick, would lose their lives as paratroopers opened fire again on locals and homes for 90 minutes on a warm summer evening. This was again an attempt to create total fear amongst the populace, and in response to the breakdown of the IRA ceasefire earlier in the day. The McElkerney boys went on to become close friends with the McWilliams brothers, who lived directly across the street from them. Together they did, or tried to do, all of the things that young lads everywhere else would do. And while one can only speculate today upon the various social and political pressures that pulled their collective psychology and ultimately shaped their respective life choices, there can be no doubt that successive British governments were determined that none would enjoy any greater social or economic opportunities for personal development than Stormont had granted their parents' generation before them. Much has been written and said about the Spring Hill and West Rock areas in the 1970s. Attempts, with the help of Father Des Wilson, who we also sadly lost last year, to create indigenous industries as a substitute to the lack of investment into the area, such as a local bakery, car repair workshops and even local cinema, were actively targeted from outside by the British state and again internally by the Catholic Church hierarchy. Between these economic factors and the ongoing British military occupation, avenues for existing with dignity beyond militant physical struggle must surely have appeared far between to many young men and women. One August day in 1977, Young Jason McWilliams, a Fianna volunteer who was on temporary release from St Patrick's Home, having been convicted of rioting a year earlier, was shot in the back and killed by a British Army sniper as he walked to his home along Spring Hill Avenue with his brother Christopher. James McElkerney describes how from that point on, Martin viewed every wheel and through the prism of militant revolutionary struggle. His people were clearly at war with the British state, and so was he, an inevitability surely. By the time Marty McElkerney had moved with his clan to the Divis area of the Falls Road, a virtual war of daily attrition was taking place between the wider community and the British Army. House raids were a daily occurrence for Marty's clan, who in the main were staunchly loyal to the politics and the ongoing campaign of the IRA. For Martin McElkerney, however, mere circumstances saw him become a volunteer within the Irish National Liberation Army, alongside his comrade Matt McLaren, husband to Marty's sister, who was shot and killed by the British Army while on active service on May 12, 1981, the day on which IRA hunger striker Francis Hughes passed away. By all accounts, the Divis unit of the INLA were a formidable group of fighters who on a daily basis conducted a hit-and-run guerrilla campaign against the British Army and the RUC when and where they could find them. It is a matter of record that in the course of one such operation in 1982, two young local lads, Stephen Bennett, aged 14, and Kevin Valladay, aged 12, were accidentally and tragically killed alongside a patrolling British soldier, an immeasurable loss to their families and to their community. By virtue of that action, Marty Mac was sentenced to life imprisonment in the H blocks of Longkesh, from where he would not be released until the Good Friday Agreement early release scheme in 1999. Marty Mac lived on the outside under the shadow of a life licence until the day he died. Upon release from prison, Marty lived and breathed the Irish Republican Socialist Party, although it was very clear to all who knew him that despite his obvious and passionate preference for a peaceful path towards Irish unity and socialism, he still viewed the world through the same prism of revolutionary struggle that he had formulated in his mind since those tragic events of the mid-1970s. Marty passionately sought to establish the Irish IRSP as a bona fide, legitimate and effective political party, immediately setting about, upon his release, to persuade former and current supporters of Republican Socialism to get involved in party structures, often in an environment wherein people were extremely reluctant, be it through fear of demonisation in the press or through fear of real physical consequence to their person. His commitment to this end was quite remarkable, as he was fully aware of the efforts of others who had tried the same thing only a few short years earlier, not least his good friend and comrade Gino Gallagher, who was murdered for his efforts to assert the primacy of politics within militant Republican Socialism. A particular gift of patience and calm was required in the process of rebuilding the party of Seamus Costello, but luckily for the IRSP, patience and calm were something that Marty Mac had in abundance. Ironically, despite his passion around rebuilding the party, having attended only a few branch meetings with Marty Mac, it appeared evident and obvious to me that he had little time for talking, unless something really needed to be said. If somebody else was saying it, Marty was content to let them carry on. It was later explained to me that this was a deliberate tactic of his, designed to ensure that all party comrades, and particularly younger ones, became used to speaking their minds and finding the skills to do so with confidence. Only if a pressing matter was being neglected or ignored would Marty pop into verse. He had seen and heard it all before. But where Marty McElkerney firmly came into his own was when there was a crisis at hand, a skill he firmly learnt within the H blocks, with all the twists and turns of horrific reality that occurred within their walls. Described accurately by friends and comrades across Ireland as the safe hands and the cool head of the IRSP, Marty Mac was famous within Republican Socialism for having a natural talent of restoring calm in situations where others would easily panic and potentially go astray, often prescribing to others a mere suggestion that they get a good night's sleep before returning and revisiting the source of panic the next day with a clearer head. For this reason he was taken seriously by both friends and political opponents and competitors alike. Go and see Marty Mac is something that every IRSP member in Belfast has heard at one stage or another. No doubt many political activists within other Republican organisations have heard the very same thing. Testimony, if anything, to the gift of patience and calm that could and indeed was often called upon at all hours of the day and night. On May 16th this year, a non-political friend of mine, speaking with some shock, stated aloud, "Jesus, Martin McElkerney has been shot." He had just read of the incident on a Belfast News internet site and was thinking out loud. Strangely, at first it did not dawn on me who he was referring to, as I had never once heard anybody refer to him as Martin McElkerney. My mind only registered him as Marty Mac. Of course, within seconds it became real though, and through that strange cloud of adrenaline-induced confusion that comes over people when shocking news arrives, I struggled with my phone in an attempt to make a call to party colleagues in West Belfast, who could clarify and hopefully deny the reality of what I had just heard. Before I could even find the correct contacts, however, my mobile began, with others trying to establish the same thing for me. Marty Mac's death was becoming real. Later in the day, we heard at first-hand heartbreaking accounts from Marty Mac's closest and most trusted friends and party colleagues, whom he had trusted enough to make a final phone call to from the Republican Socialist plot, Milltown Cemetery, before finally and tragically taking his own life. Martin's family are aware of this event, and the belief of his friends that he done so in order to avoid any inaccurate and potentially dangerous speculation. Again, the safe hands and the cool head, total commitment to the well-being of his party, his friends, family and his community. In this call, Marty made one friend aware that he was happy with the direction that his party had been going in recent times, and directed him to ensure that they stayed confidently on that path, assuring him further that everything will be fine if they did so. Before making the short journey to Milltown, he had gone into Coslow House, the headquarters of the IRSP. There he made observations about various structural needs of the building and left directions with other members regarding damp proofing and other matters about deeds to the building. Nobody had any idea that anything was wrong. There were no signs of distress whatsoever. Unbelievably, Marty Mac, having made his friends and party colleagues fully aware of his intentions, it was he who sought to calm them, as they passionately pleaded with him to reconsider, while scrambling to start cars and fight their way through traffic to try to physically prevent what was unfolding. Tragically, however, Marty Mac had taken his own life. By the time his friends had arrived, there was nothing they could do. Heartbroken, they called the ambulance services, who by all accounts did a sterling job in trying to preserve the life of Martin McElkerney, all of whose working organs were donated to others in need, as per his instructions. Early on a blistering hot morning, shortly after his death, I was asked by the IRSP to set up a public address system in Milltown Cemetery to provide the sound for Marty Mac's funeral ceremony. A lack of available cars and subsequent logistics meant that I had to remain in the cemetery with the expensive and bulky equipment for around 4 hours, getting badly sunburned in the process. But to be honest, I was honoured to have been asked and to have taken the task. But while sitting there in the sun-baked silence, pondering on the strange reality that this was the spot where Marty Mac had tragically taken his own life just days earlier, I noticed first the presence of a military or police spotter plane, which went on to circle perpetually overhead. Not long afterwards it was replaced by the intense buzzing of a police helicopter, and by the time Republican Belfast had entered Milltown Cemetery en masse to pay its respects, it was clear that the state operation to prevent or dissuade Martin McElkerney's friends and comrades from burying him in peace was in full swing. The same state which through oppressive tactics had created the prison through which Marty Mac had made militant decisions in life were determined to maintain the pressure upon him and his friends in death. Whether or not they were aware that Marty Mac passionately sought a peaceful solution to Ireland's political affairs is a matter of speculation. If you ask me, it is unlikely that they would have cared. Regardless, he would have wanted us all to persevere for a better future for everybody and the Socialist Republic ultimately.